Hello everyone, this is Carl Shiflett, and in this short video I'd like to show you how to use the data sources window with an object data source to create a WPF master detail form. Alright, in the blog post where you can download the code, there's a single zip file that contains 4 solutions. And the particular solution I'm looking at now is the starter solution for C#. And if I open up my Windows Explorer, you can see that I've got a folder here, the Master Detail Data Source Windows Starter. That's the folder I'm in now. And there's also one here called Demo. And what's inside this folder is the completed solution. And there's a corresponding one for Visual Basic, if that's your language of choice. I just happen to be using C# right now. Now, inside this particular solution is a data class. And the data class is very simple. It has 2 observable collections. They're right here, these 2 public observable collections, one of customer, one of address type. And if we come down here, we can see that all this simple code does here is create entities and populates those collections. And that's all we're doing. Now, in the model folder is our entities. So let's start with customer. So you can see they're very, very simple. We're not implementing change notification or IDID-error info. Just simple automatic properties, and we can see that customer has an observable collection of address, and that's the addresses property. Alright, so we have a one-to-many here. In our address entity, we have of course all the automatic properties for address, and address has an associated address type right here, and address type is real simple, just got an ID and a name. Alright, now let me show you one more thing. Over in my app XAML folder, I've pre-made 3 brushes, one for the title background, one for the border of the title, and one for the title's foreground. Alright, and I'll show you how to use the resource picker to assign these to properties in just a minute. So before we get started making our app, let's take a quick look at the demo application. I'm going to go ahead and spin this up, and I'll run the app here for you and demonstrate it. So here, in this particular app, we've chosen to demonstrate how to use a combo box to provide record selection, right? So if I select down here, if I select class now, you can see that the customer entity changed and the address has changed. And if I come back and reselect Dean, Dean's back up here and all of Dean's addresses show. Inside the data grid, we know that this is an address type, and there's an entity behind this, and we can see that we can select right here. We can come and pick and change. If we wanted to, we can come over here and we can edit this as TREET, and you can see it's very simple. You can even come down here and you can click and you can add a record if you want. So you can put in whatever you want. Very, very simple. Alright, let's put this away for now, and let's get started on our application. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my properties window, and watch what happens when I come over here and I click the window. Notice that the properties window, I have my selection sync, so my property window says I have windows selected, and I'll show you one thing that I'm going to show you anyway, which is the doc outline. If I click here on the document outline icon, it brings up my doc outline, and if I click on any object in the document outline, it becomes selected in the design surface and also in the properties window. So that's the selection sync that's built into the WPF and Silverlight Designer for Visual Studio 2010. And also that applies to XAML also. So for instance, right now grid is selected, but if I was to come up here and select window, notice that window is now selected in the XAML editor and also in the properties window. Alright, so let's get started. First thing we need to do is add ourselves a title. So what I like to do is, if I have the room, is to give myself plenty of room. There's no reason to try to position my row exactly where I know it's going to end up. What I'd rather do is just give myself a nice work area and then allow the WPF layout system to shrink everything down later when I auto size it, right? So the first thing we need ourselves a border. A border is a really cool control. You'll use it a lot, and it allows you to wrap other controls and create nice rounded edges and put backgrounds around them. It's just a really nice control. Now I come over here, I'm going to get myself a text block and drag and drop it up here. Now what I want to do next is I want to multi-select the text block and my grid, or I'm sorry, my text block and my border. So I can click on my border, and then I can control click on my text block, and now I've got them multi-selected. Well, how do you know it's multi-selected, Carl? Because if I look over here, I can see object and it says multiple. Another way you can multi-select controls is, now you'll notice that the document outline has them both selected. So if I unselect and grab my window, I can click on border, and then I can hold my control key down and I can click on text block, and now they're multi-selected. Alright, what I want to do is I want to reset layout for these controls. So it's a feature we added, so you can right click, reset layout all. Now what this did is it just it reset the height and width to auto. As you can see over here, they've both been set to auto. The horizontal and vertical alignments have both been set to stretch, and the margin has been zeroed out. Now, it's time to work on the border now. So in order, if I just want to select the border, I can come over here and just click on border, and we can see that border is now selected. And what you were seeing, by the way, every time I hovered over here, there's a little preview. That's what this little window is over here. It shows a little preview for your document outline. So now that I've got my border selected, what I want to do is go ahead, set my border thickness to 2, corner radius to 30. See, I'm starting to get that nice little round edge there. And I'd like to set my vertical alignment to center. And we get it all shrunk down there. And my margin to 11 and my padding to 7. So now I'm starting to get a little shape here for my border. Now if I come down to my brushes, I want to set my background here. I'm going to use the property marker. So if I click on the property marker, I can say apply resource, and let's go get that background resource that I've already predefined. And while we're at it, we got a border brush, we've got a resource for that also. So you can see how the tooling enables me to easily and quickly select resources that have been predefined in my application. They could have been done by a designer or another skilled developer you have on your team. All right, now let's go ahead and work with our text block now. So I can do that, I can just click on my text block, and let's change the title to customer, because that's what the name of the form is. This is a customer maintenance form, and our font size is 18. It's bold, and we need to set the foreground. So we come over here to our foreground, and we've got a resource all set up for that. And it's right here, form, title, foreground. Now you can see you got these nice little swatches. So this swatch is white. It's kind of hard to see, but well, what do you expect? White on white, right? And then you can see here's our finished title area. Now remember I was telling you about automatic sizing. So what I can do is I can select my grid, and now my rail adorners are active. And if I come up here and I hover over anywhere over the rail adorner, I get the little pop-up window here, and I can click auto. And now look how nice that is. See, it all sized up real good for me. Alright, so the next part we're going to add in is our combo box that allows us to do record selection, right? So again, let's follow the same pattern we just did. Let's go ahead and we'll give ourselves a lot more workspace than we know we need, just so we don't have to get crammed in. And let's go ahead and add ourselves a stack panel. So I'm going to click on my stack panel, and this time I'm going to do what they call a draw create. So the draw create is where you click on the control you'd like to create, and then you'd see how you got the crosshairs, and you can see here, notice that the background changes. That what this is a feature of the WPF designer. It shows you your drop target. So it kind of grays out the other areas, and the cell that you're going to draw in or drop in would be white. So I've got my stack panel created now. Now what I want to do is go ahead and add a text block, and I can do that since the stack panel is selected. I'm just going to double click and add a text block, and I'm going to double click and add a combo box. Alright, now let's go ahead and set up our stack panel the way we want it. So a stack panel can orient its children either horizontally or vertically. Now right now they're horizontally oriented. So what I want to, these are vertically oriented. What I want to do is change it to horizontal. So to do that, I can click on the stack panel. You can see that it's selected. Right click, and again I'm going to use that reset layout all. So that, remember, that clears your height and widths and your alignments and your margins. Now I come over here to my stack panel. I'm going to change my orientation to horizontal. and you can see that, so that looks real nice here, right? And I'd like to set my margins to 11. Margin goes to 11. Alright, so now what I want to do is work on my text block and my combo box. So I'm going to select both of these controls. And you can see that by control clicking I've selected them. I'm going to right click, reset layout all. Alright, and now I want to do is take my vertical alignment and set it to center. That looks pretty good now. Alright, so let's click on text block. And what we need to do is change this to the tag that we're looking for, which is select customer. And we can select our combo box here. And let's go ahead and set a margin on this of 7, 0. That'll scoot it over there. And set its width at 175 is good. That's longer than anything that we're going to need. And the last piece that we'll need to do is click on our grid again and set this to auto. And that's looking pretty nice now. Alright, so what we're going to do now is go ahead and wire up or set up our data source. So in order to see our data source, we're going to go to the data menu, click on add new data source, and we're going to select object and next. And now we just need to drill down to our particular screen. Now one thing I forgot to tell you, so I'm going to click cancel, is before you add a new data source you should always build your application. So I'm going to Control-Shift-B and rebuild my application. If you don't rebuild your application and you've changed any of your code files and you're going to select one of those code files for your data source, you're going to have a problem. Or if you haven't built since you've changed an entity data or your entity framework, you'll have a problem. Alright, so let's do that again. Let's go add new data source. And by the way, if you didn't want to do add new data source this way, you could say show data sources, and you could add a new data source from here just by clicking. So there's a couple of different ways to get to it, and you can also click on this guy too. Alright, so let's go to object, next, and come down here and let's drill into our namespace that we need, and I need to select the customer object. So I'll just click finish. Alright, so now we get this nice pretty data sources window here, and what I want to do is I just need to take customer and I want to drag and drop customer right onto the combo box. Alright, so now that we've dragged and dropped our customer data source onto the combo box, let me show you a couple things. First thing we need to do is we need to go over to our combo box, select it here, and we want to set its display member path to name so that we can see the customer's name inside the combo box. So we'll do that. We'll set that to name, right? And then let me show you the XAML that's been created so far. So down in here, first thing that happened is it added an event, a loaded event called window loaded, and I'll show you the code in just a second. It added a collection view source in the window resources, assigned it a key, customer view source, and set up a design source, or the design instance of customer, and create list equals true. And so what that means is if I want to use my data binding tooling, it will understand that this this collection view source inside it is going to have a type of a list of customers. Alright, now the other thing that it did is wherever the combo box was, it goes up a level and finds a panel, and then it creates a data context, or it assigns the data context property on that panel to the resource that it just created. And this is just the pattern that the data sources window follows, right? And then we can see here's our combo box, and what's happened is here's our display member path name. That's what we just did. We changed that. It set the item source to binding, which is this list from the collection view source, and over here it says the selected value to customer ID. Now if we switch over real quick to our code window, let's go to our code behind, and we can see here that the data sources window has added a little bit of Boilermaker code. So it's saying our collection view source is a customer view source, and that's equal to what it's going to do. It's going to use the find resource method to go find that and then cast it as a collection view source, right? And then down here what we need to do is we need to set the source property on this collection view source. All right, now if there's any chance that this could ever be null, then what you could do is you could change this code so use the as method, and for VB it'd be a try cast instead of just casting it directly. All right, so down here what we'd like to do is uncomment this code, and what it's saying is it's looking for us to set the customer view source property. In the case of our application here, we're going to set that to data customers, right? So that's our collection that'll fill this up, all right? And we have a static collection. So now I should be able to press F5, run my application, and we can see that I've got two records inside my combo box. So everything's working good. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and close our code window up now, and let's get back to designing our form. So we'll get our workspace all set up nice. All right, so what we're going to do now is we want to set up a details form down here. So I'm going to select my grid, and once again, I'm going to give myself a lot more room than I need, just like before. So I added another row here, and what I want to do is we'd like to see here is a details form, right? So to do that, over here in the DataSource window, right now it's showing that if I drag this and dropped it here, I would get a data grid. Well, I could change that to a details form. All right, and now what I'd like to do is change the customer ID. Right now it's a text block. I'm sorry, it's a text box, and I want to change it to a text block. So now I'm going to show customer, email, and name. And that's going to work out pretty good for us. All right, so let's go ahead now. We'll take customer. We're going to drag and drop it onto our design surface here. All right, so we can see that we've got it here. It's all moved in nice. We're well within our row here. All right, so what we want to do is go ahead and let's select our grid. So we do that by just clicking on our grid here. And I want to reset a few properties. The first one I'm going to reset is its height and the width here. Excuse me. Okay, so we've got the height and width of my grid. I want both of those to be set to auto, and I want to set my vertical alignment to top, and I want to reset my margins to 11. So now I've got my form. It's all nice and laid out over on the side like before. And I want to take this row and make it auto-sized. All right, so now we should be able to press F5 and run our application. All right, bring it into view, and as I change these guys, you can see here, look how nice that is. They both changed. Now we need to we need to make a couple of adjustments here, so that's pretty easy. So let's go ahead and select our two controls here and set their widths, I don't know, 200. There we go. That looks nice. And the other piece that we may want to take a look at here, and I'll show you if we click on our document outline and we find this text block right here, which is here, I noticed that it doesn't have a width. See, I was able to get the customer ID, and I think vertical alignment center has already been set, so that's good. So now if we spin our application back up, we'll see that, yeah, see how this is off a little bit? What we need to do is we need to make an adjustment. So let's come back to our form, and customer ID here, and this is our label. Here is our text block, and I'm going to reset the height like that. So by resetting the height on this text block, notice now that these two, they all line up nice, and we've got our widths all set up good. So that's nice. All right, so let's go ahead and add our data grid to our form. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to just click on our grid, and we can see that we've got a nice area down here where I can put our data grid. Now, if you remember, when we were back over here, when we clicked on the customer and we dragged and dropped it onto the combo box here. Here's our combo box, and remember I showed you what happened to the stack panel. So if we come up here, and now we're going to look at the stack panel now, And we can see that when we dragged and dropped from the data sources window onto the combo box, yes, it set the display member path and the item source, but it also went and looked up the tree of elements until it found a panel. In this case, it was a stack panel, and it set the data context property to the static resource customer view source. All right. Now, what's going to happen when we drag and drop a data grid down here into this grid is it's going to go and look for the first panel and set a data context. Well, in this case, the first panel will be the root grid, and that means that the data context would end up being set up on the root grid for this data grid down here, and that just wouldn't make sense if you were to go back and read the XAML or maintain it sometime in the future. So in order to make this simple and to make your applications easy to maintain over time, we're going to go ahead and add a grid down here so that when we drag and drop our data grid down here, the data context will be set on this grid here and not the outer grid. So let's go ahead and right click, reset layout all, and I'm going to set a margin of 11 so I have a nice little spacing here, right? All right. So before I drag my grid, the customer ID column, I really don't need that one to show in my grid. So I'm going to go ahead and just set that to none. And now I can take my grid, drag and drop it, and now you get the nice drop target like I showed you before. And it's just dropped in here. So now that it's dropped in here, I can just right click, reset layout all. So now my grid is all snapped in there, looks nice. Let's go ahead and spin this up, and so we can see what it looks like. Okay, well, looks like we might have to make a few adjustments. I can see that street is out of order, and also our columns, the sizing doesn't look too good. Let's check to see if our record selection works. Yes, so record selection is working good. Data sources window did that for us. That was very nice. So let's go ahead and adjust our columns. So to do that, with the data grid selected, I'm going to come over to my properties window, and I'm going to look for columns, and I'll just click on this little button here, and it brings up my collection editor for my columns. So to move street, I just have to select street and just move it up. And now you can see my columns are ordered the way I want them. Now let's address the size problem. With street selected, we can see here that the width of the column is set to size to header. Well, if we look down here, our size to header is not going to be good because street has longer text, right? So what we're going to do is just going to come over here, right click, and say reset value. Or not say reset value, we're just going to select it. Reset value, reset value, and the last one is reset value. Okay, now if I close this, I go ahead and spin our application up now, and we can see here that we've got our columns are in the correct order, and I've got the sizing corrected, and we didn't break our record selection, so that's good. Now, so the only thing we have left to do is to add our combo box column in. So let's go into our XAML. And I come into my column, and I'm just going to paste in the XAML that I have on the website. That's on the blog post. So here's our data grid combo box column. First property we set as our item source, and we're going to use an X static so that we can address the data class address types property. So this is a static property on the data class here, and it provides an observable collection of address types that we can use for our item source. Display member path, that's the property that we would like to see displayed in the combo box, so we're using name, and if we look at address type, it's got a name property right there. Next one is the header, and our next one is our selected value binding, and so this is going to tell us the binding that we're going to actually bind to the address type ID. This is the value inside this collection that we want to bind to. And here, our selected value path, that's inside our combo box. We want to make this property value match to this property value so that when, and I'll go ahead and spin this up now, so that when the home, whenever I select and change a combo box value, so I've got the 3 entities, and I'm going to match the property value. I'll just scoot this over here so we can see it. So it's the address type ID, so that when I change it, it'll now match correctly. So if I go to the other record and then I come back, we can see that these still match correctly here. So we're matching a value, an ID value inside a list or inside this collection with an ID value, so that now when we go back and we change again, we come back, this is actually looking up the correct one. All right. So that's our short walkthrough on how to create these master details using the data sources window. And I hope you've learned something from this video, and I wish you a wonderful and productive day. Thank you.